Okay, so good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern to try and figure out the future for smarter building. So it's really great to have you with us today. Our first day back from our summer break. So in case you're wondering who we are, our profiles are listed on mondaylive.org. And we do have some new members today, so please do check that out, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Just remind everyone that views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. So keep that in mind. And post any questions and comments on the Zoom chat so we can make this whole thing much more interactive. It's always a lot better when we do that. So that's great. And this slide deck is available on mondaylive.org, the actual homepage. So if you need anything that we've shared here. So this being a new month of September, we're going to focus this month on the theme of innovation. So we're really sort of making it a call out to everybody to innovate. So that's the theme, because we think there's a lot of innovation going on. So really looking forward to that. And our agenda today, we'll have a bit a normal chat with news and trends, and then we'll get into innovation. And today, what we really want to do is just talk about innovation from our different perspectives. We'll each sort of get an opportunity of talking about what kind of innovation we're most excited about, and then we can discuss it. And for the rest of the month, we'll refine that into some of the specific subtopics of innovation. So looking forward to that. But before that, I'm going to hand it over, as always, to Ken Sinclair from Automated Buildings for the latest on what's going on in the industry. Ken.
Thanks, Anto. Yeah, so we somehow kept ourselves very busy during the summer break. Lots of things going on. We celebrated the 50 years of our original consulting company. I started talking, and we did some interviews with some folks in the industry that are at the same period of time, and it dawned on me that, yep, this is 50 years I've been in the industry as well. So we also have a summary there, the transformative year of smarter buildings. That basically is a roll-up of where we were just before we broke up. And I guess that was we were gone for July and August. So anyway, yeah, there's a summary if you want to catch up as to where we were. The one below that is SES Consulting. This is the kids who took over the company, and now they've been at it almost 25 years. We originally started the company in 1975, Jane and I, and they're heavy into decarbonization. Of interest, I told them that that'll never pay the bills, but I was wrong. Decarbonization is a growing industry, and certainly they have done a great job of that. And this is a project that they're working on now, a retrofit, and there's a video of that that shows kind of that whole growth in the decarbonization world. So kudos to them, and glad to be part of that. And I guess we got the first 50 years, and now they're, like I say, well into just about finished their first 25 years. So I think that also kind of shows you the timeline in our industry, how long some of this stuff takes to get going. At the bottom there, we were during the summer months, we were hard at putting together our program for AHR in Vegas. And wow, we've got some 18 sessions. It's our 27th year of doing the free education sessions. There's a link there to get you registered into AHR. They've given us a 400-room theater, 400-person theater to do our presentations, because in the last two times we've run out of room in our rooms. So we're going to have to scramble to try and fill that. So we've come up with, I think, some really interesting programming. We're going a lot of directions. So we're very close. In fact, it's being presented to AHR right now. Probably by next meeting, we should have a copy of the program. Some other stuff going on at the bottom there. 6G. I don't know if you guys are as impressed with 5G as I am. But 6G is looking to be something incredible. All of Netflix in 1 second. That sounds pretty quick to me. There's also a lot of discussion going on in how we can shape 6G to be even more powerful and more interactive. It's going to be yet another game changer, I believe. So I'm encouraging our minds to take a look at that and get involved in some of these movements that are going on. Right beside that, the smiling face is of the guy from Jason from Stantec, and I think this is an interesting move because again, it's we had SES as one of our consultant, but this is another consultant coming across the floor, and what I think it's indicating is there's definitely a struggle going on. I mean, it's probably not the correct word, but interactions going on between the MSIs and the consultants. And what the consultants are finding that the MSIs are having such an input into their projects that they need to be part of that for several reasons. And I think that's just the first of a wave that we're seeing that's happening. The other one, next one over there, the big release from China. I think it's kind of subtle there, but if you read that, they're saying by 2027, 70% of their devices will be intelligent. And by 2030, 90% penetration aligned with carbon targets. Interesting claims. And 2035, I guess that is a full AI society. So these are goals that are being set globally by other identities, and I think it's good for us to watch that. We kind of think that we're leading edge, but I sometimes wonder if we're barely keeping up. So the other thing we've done is we've come up with a newsletter to try and just pull together some of the work our sponsors and contributing editors are doing. There's a thing of that underneath the smart building. Actually, the smart building is starting to come up in a few weeks. We're a media sponsor of that. That's over on the right-hand side there. And we have a podcast from Ed Merwin celebrating his 50 years with Tritium. So just a lot of, it's actually interesting. There's a lot of, we'll be able to have a 50-year club. And the other one is we're working on our media kit. And when they wrote up the media kit, the first thing that I saw on it that hadn't really dawned on me is it's not just a place to create your awareness, but it's a place you become a publisher. As a sponsor, as an advertiser, you become a publisher, and it's a way now to get your information as part of automated buildings, and that's starting to have some attraction, some of the folks. Anyway, enough said. Back to you,
Okay.
Mato.
Thank you. Lots has been going on while we've been at the beach or somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
Over some. So thank you, Ken.
Okay.
So Kimon is our new member of Monday Live. So first, welcome to Kimon. Kimon's been a guest several times, so I think most of you will know him. But if you can do just a brief intro and then tell us what these big percentage numbers are. They don't look great.
Yeah, they don't actually. This was at the Building Smart USA conference workshop that happened at the Esri headquarters about 10 days ago now. And there was a lot of presentations about the standards in BIM, but also about GIS and where things are going. Some pretty interesting things. Some trends that we've been seeing is that the horizontal infrastructure, railways and bridges and whatever, they're jumping more into it than the vertical in many ways, even though there are a lot of interesting things happening there. But at the same time, there was quite a bit of discussion about this particular set of slides that the AEC industry is really not using the data. First of all, it's unstructured, 90% of it, and 96% is unused. And these are obviously just broad numbers, but it shows the problem that we have, but it also shows the opportunity, I think. And that's what I was looking for. There's going to be a series of articles posted on automated buildings about this session. It's actually going to be three or four actually, where I'm putting kind of a synopsis of the presentations, but also my observations. One thing I was looking for at this conference was their new standard that's being developed. It's still very early. It's called IFC 5, which is a BIM standard kind of going forward into away from file exchanges into more information and transactions, JSON, whatever. And I personally, I've been doing that myself for 20 years. So I've been very interested to see if the standard comes to a point that it's actually usable. It was a little bit not disappointing, but it was not as far as I was hoping to hear about it. But it's definitely something to keep track of, and especially for other domains outside of the building industry. And if we start getting into controls and what C4SB is doing, that's another connection I was looking for in the C4SB work that Rick's going to cover next. We've been piloting how to connect buildings to automation systems and sensors and controls. So anyway, trying to connect the dots here, and I'll have more to talk about the innovation later on.
The 96% of data, AEC data as unused, that is staggeringly.
Yeah, and some people challenged it because as an architect, I know this, when you're designing stuff, you're going through a lot of stuff and throwing a lot of stuff away. So I'm not sure where this number actually came from. There's some background to it, but it's just kind of it is kind of shocking, and it's all over the map sometimes. There's some projects that might even be worse than this, that almost no data makes its way into operations, for example. And I've seen many examples of that. And there are others that they actually do transition quite a bit of data. And there were some presentations even at this conference about that with the work that we've done actually with the State Department of getting data into operations. So it's very uneven, but the point is that there's a lot of improvement that is needed. And unless we address it, then it just kind of gets swept under the rug or whatever.
It'd be interesting to understand how they're defining used.
Yeah,
because
that's the question.
Most operations, they only the facilities people look at floor plans. And if they use it once, does that qualify as it being used? Or do they have to use it on a monthly basis for it to be used? And there's so much data to track when it comes to a building. It really depends on the organization and how they manage their facilities, because I've certainly seen organizations that go way beyond a 96% utilization. And I mean, do you ever need to reference the shop drawings for cabinetry and millwork after they're built? So does that mean it's unused afterwards? Or was it used because it was built? I mean, it's kind of like, what data from the design and construction team is actually applicable for the operations team to use? And I would say, it would maybe be about 35% of the documentation, maybe 60, depends on the type of building.
Yeah,
but not
it's a
100.
use case thing. Yeah. Well, I said, there's some owners that we work with that actually have 100% on a very specific use case. So you could count that and say, we're using 100% of what's handed over into operation. Other owners on the other extreme are using 0%. They have it in their requirement to deliver facility data into operations, and none of it makes it over. And it's that whole range in between. It really depends on how it's actually carried out, how the governance. And that's another theme that came in the last couple of weeks with the Asset Leadership Network too, is this, it's really a virus in the industry that this data is not really making its way over. I know there's some great examples of how it is, but overall it's just still a mess, I think, in general.
So Ramon, this is Steve. I just want to clarify on the definition of AEC data. Are we talking as David implied, on the sort of the construction documentation as opposed to the real-time data coming out of the control systems?
Right. I think in this particular slide, it's more on the design and construction side going to operations. And there's a report from FMI that they kind of describe how this number came up.
Okay.
But I think it needs to be much more precise when we start talking about this. But it's also, it's hard to generalize it because there's so many variations of use depending on the owners.
I'd put the number at 100%, but that's just from my 35 years of experience of it's more of a, instead of an architectural handoff, it's an archaeological dig that you have to go through to try and get data. But I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Yeah. Well, your next slide's going to solve all this. That's where we're going with this, right?
I don't
All right,
think
let's-
I don't think I have a slide, do I?
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
So let's go over to you then, Rick. So this is so we've decided that we're going to have a C4SP update on Mondays, not to talk about all of these working groups, but to give Rick and others an opportunity to talk about anything that's happened since last week. So, Rick.
Yeah. So every week there will be an opportunity for one of the leaders of these different active working groups. And talk about active working groups. We already have several changes to this list of 12, whether it's the name of a working group or the addition of a couple of different ones that are not on this list. So that'll be one of the key things we're going to try and do is point people to the website where the working groups will be articulated and where the correct names and the right logos will be. But this is our first pass of we've got a bunch of different working groups that will be of interest to different people in the industry. All of them have something to do with the digital transformation of one part of the life cycle or another of buildings, and then how buildings fit into cities, and how buildings fit onto grids, and how buildings fit into society. But the standardization, the working groups that are all working on either open source or open standards of how buildings work over time, or how specific parts of buildings can become more digital, is all towards that goal of why are we not using data around one of the most important parts of our global economy, which is design, constructions, operations, and maintenance of buildings, and why are we not doing a better job of using data to see whether or not the buildings are doing what they're supposed to do in the way they're supposed to do it? Is just it's a problem whose time has come to be solved. And what we're doing with C4SP is trying to organize different working groups, people that are the most expert or the most interested in these different challenges to come together, solve some problems, document it, put it in GitHub, and then let everybody leverage off of the work that's been done. So on a weekly basis on Monday Live, we'll take the opportunity to have somebody join and talk about what their working group is doing.
Correct.
Thank you, Rick. Let us move on because we're running a little bit late. Any other thoughts or news or anything anybody want to bring up before we move on? Hearing nothing, we shall move on. And so we're talking about innovation. And I just want to tell you a little story. I obviously I use AI to do these graphics, and I did this one after a few goes, and I thought it was fun. So I thought we'll use this one, and I kind of wanted to have another one that sort of more, had more things going on, and I had a building on it. So I asked it to do that, and this is what it came up with. There were several versions of it. But what was interesting was that I then kind of said, hey, would you mind interjecting some kind of AI or robot in this picture? I can see its influence in how we're innovating. And it came back with this. which basically says, well, maybe we don't need you anymore. So I thought I'd just share that thought with you. That's obviously
The
not serious, but
Humans are out of the picture.
Can you go back one to the earlier one? It's kind of weird. I've never seen anyone catch a paper airplane.
well, there you go. That's AI. Nor hold a light bulb when it's lit. But anyway. So anyway, well, we're going to talk about innovation, and I'm going to give an opportunity for each of us on the panel here to talk about innovation. And Kimon, we're going to start with Kimon because he provided some slides, and I've actually got it here.
Okay.
So let's start with you, and then we'll talk about that, and we'll move on to others.
Yeah, so I'll get to the innovation, but I want to start first with a story that I actually experienced personally. So this is a true story. I had a friend who was engaged to get married to a PhD. They were in love. He had these books on the shelf that had his name on it in his place. And a month before the marriage, we said, oh, let's take a look at one of these books. True story. Next slide. They were all blank. There was nothing in them. Beautiful books on the shelf, but nothing inside them. So obviously that wedding was called off, and they went their separate ways, and they're both fine. But the reason I tell this is if you go to the next slide, Anto. So I posted something on LinkedIn last week that we're seeing these BIMs. So I'm coming from the building information modeling world. You can put a bunch of stuff in the BIM, and you can do a lot with it. But if you don't put something in there, then the BIM just becomes a container. It's like an empty bucket. So it's really up to the designers and the engineers and the people that are actually doing the work. If you expect to get something out of the model, you need to put it in. But here's the paradox from the innovation perspective. There's some fantastic models, fantastic BIMs, fantastic digital twins out there. But unless you can get to the data in a format that doesn't require you to be an expert in that particular app, you can't even check it. So in the past, when we relied on paper, you'd get a set of paper documents, engineering documents. You could look at single line diagrams and flow and how the systems are talking to each other, and you can kind of make sense of it. And then you had a schedule, whether it's even hand drafting it the same way, right? So we could see it in an interface that made sense to us. But a lot of these models, the BIM models and the other tools, are so complex. For example, Revit can even take 20 minutes to open up a model of it to get to the stuff that you want, to get to that attribute that says, I'm an air handling unit and I'm connected to this whatever other asset in the building. And we're seeing this over and over again. This is nothing new, actually. We've seen it quite a bit, where the owners can't even check consistently what's in the model. Now, there's some, I'm generalizing here, but this is going back to the 96% problem, is that it is a real big issue because owners can't really see it. So everything is in BIM. There's GIS because it's kind of location and everything, and altogether digital twins need to be connected to each other, which goes back to the need for something like C4SB and what's happening with the semantics and ontology work that we're doing. If we can't see the data, then we have this beautiful book. I call this a Hollywood BIM. It looks fantastic. You open up the BIM and there's nothing in there. There's no sensors, there's nothing. And you don't realize it until the building is done because you can't check it along the way. Which goes back to how important it is to have this open source, open connectivity to the data within the proprietary applications to check it as the progress goes along. Because a lot in the design and construction world think we'll just hand it over at the end of the building and the owner's going to use this, but then it's too late. So it's two directional. One direction is the BIM world. There's obviously a lot of engineering and design decisions that are being made, that are being put into tools and formats that are important for the design and construction, but then to get the subset that is needed for operations, and then to add other information, the sensors, the real-time data, whatever, to get to digital twins, we need to have these open connectivity so we can query the model as it's being built, not after the fact, because then it's too late. You have the book on the shelf and then you're getting married to that building. And that's kind of the connection there, I think. And that's an opportunity, I think, to get that 96% down. And yes, that number is generalized, but it's a shocker because like I mentioned, we've literally had some owners that have gone for 12 years with fantastic BIMs, zero data in the models, zero, literally zero. They don't have any of the assets coming out. These beautiful buildings, beautiful models, no data for operations. We have other owners which were presented at the Building Smart Alliance, I mean, the Building Smart International or USA conference, like the State Department, which we've worked with, where you give a very specific view. You say, I want data coming into operations, and here are the assets that I want, and here are the attributes that I want to those assets, and here I want the ID systems set up, and they're getting that data finally coming in to their CMMS application. So it's certainly possible, but it has to be a deliberate move by contracting, by people that check it, the people that open the book and look at the book and can see it. But if you don't have an app that can open the book, then yes, it's a problem. That's why we need these open connectivity and a way to connect with them. And you need to have these more advanced tools to use all this. Now, the other paradox with all this stuff is the data is there somewhere. It's in different formats. If you can't get to it in a consistent way and we start using AI, AI is not going to solve the problem. If the bucket is empty, it's going to make up stuff. It's going to make up stuff that look fantastic and real, but we need to fill that bucket or fill that book with the content that can tell that story. So the last piece, if you go to the next slide. So when I went to the ASHRAE conference, I go to the design and construction conferences in BIM. BIM is very much heavy over the years, has been focused very much on the 3D, mainly 3D and clash detection. Clash detection, every single clash in a building, a duct running into a structural column or whatever, or a structural beam, cost about $6,000. There's some numbers out there, and there's tens of thousands of clashes that happen in buildings. So it's certainly a very valid use case to find the clashes. But at the same time, the data that's missing, I think, is important. And then when I look from the data side, a lot of times I hear, even on the ASHRAE conference, I heard this quite a bit. Well, why do we need a detailed BIM to put our data about semantic models, about how these systems, the ontology and semantics, how systems talk to each other? The reason you need a model, and it doesn't have to be a 3D BIM, it could be just a 2D document or a GIS or whatever for them, some kind of diagram, some kind of a map that shows you where that data lands, because otherwise you end up just like these books that are just shredded. You have a bunch of data just sitting in front of you. Well, here's a sensor and here's a control and here's a this, which is exactly what we're running into in the pilot project that's going on right now that was built the wrong way, which is a typical challenge, right? The data is not in the model in a relationship in that location. Therefore, when we go and try and connect the dots, you're going literally point by point and saying, what does this switch do? Oh, we have to go up to the third floor and see which lights or which systems are connected to that. So that's the opportunity, I think, for this audience and everybody that's a domain expert here to think in terms of what's the minimum information that we need to have support that use case? What's the minimum ID and location so we can have a context of that data related to the building? And how do we work all together to have a common kind of understanding of the semantics and ontology, which goes back to the open source and open standard connectivity between systems? And how do we keep those connections lightweight? Because it's impossible to expect somebody to understand all the complexities about BIM and all the complexities about engineering systems, but it's absolutely achievable to say what are the common touch points so I can find that sensor in the building that's connected to that air handling unit so I know which room and which occupant in the room it's impacting. Anyway, that's the exciting part for me and the innovation part for me is the work that we're doing there, that we actually are solving. We actually have sensors and data coming in now. We can't share it yet publicly, but it's exciting work when an actual building was taken and we're reverse engineering it and putting the sensor systems and data back in there from others, from Skycentrics and others that have their data coming in. We see it in the building. We touch on a space, we touch on a piece of equipment, we start seeing the data actually being live in the BIM. And I think doing it in a short time like that was pretty exciting. And we've done this over the years, but having all these different groups together working was I think, a big achievement.
So I think what you're saying is that in a way, innovation is creating all of this data, and we need a sort of a different kind of innovation, or we need to innovate about how to actually use it. Is that
Yeah, we need to
kind of
innovate. Yes, we need to innovate about how we use it and how we access it, because you can't expect everybody to dive into that tool to go and find the attribute about that sensor inside the Revit model, or to use a specific app to get there. So you need open connectivity to the data that's inside these innovative systems, to use it in the app that of your choice to see the connectivity between things. For example, there, if we go back to the air handling unit example,
Right.
and the innovation, the concern I have is this, all this innovation that's happening, sometimes it's too much noise. And the Hollywood BIM problem that I described is almost happening to AI too. You're saying, well, AI is going to solve all this. Okay, what happens if AI finds the wrong information and doesn't come up with the right? That's on us, that we don't have the data accessible to humans and AI to do their work. And yes, AI can help um, put some of these broken pieces back together. And you can use a signal from the building, like what Keith talks about all the time, right, on the facile. You can actually see stuff and start doing stuff with it. You don't have to have it, the tornado, completely tamed. But if we don't move toward making the data accessible, we have a blank book, therefore nobody else can read it. Let's put something in the book, even if it's just basic, so we can share it in a way that you can read it, have some kind of a common language that is not an alien language that we can understand, so we can find the IDs of that sensor, which is what we're running into on the pilot project, right? There's all these systems, control systems, they just have random names all over the place, a bunch of data coming in, and you have to go piece by piece and find what's there.
Thank you. Thanks, Kimon. Any thoughts from the group? Or we shall just move on and let the next innovator come along and talk about the innovation that they're most excited about. Who wants to go?
I'm glad everybody's jumping in.
There you go. Oh, I
My
was going to pick on
birthday.
you, Steve. So why don't you go?
Okay. So the one I want to talk about is the real possibility of moving from RS-45 networks to Ethernet and or T1L networks. So to go from, low speed, limited distance, 100 meters on Ethernet, to much higher speeds, 10 meg, and distances, particularly with T1L, now we're talking 1,000 meters, 1 kilometer, as opposed to 100 meters, okay? And further, with T1L, being able to do that over a twisted pair as opposed to Cat 4 or Cat 5, which means we can reuse cable that's already in the building. So I think in part, it's not just about the performance of T1L as a, as a communication media. It's the fact that T1L is at the lower level in the stack, the communication stack, and that all of a sudden you can support multiple protocols on the same wire. Okay, so whether it's MQTT or it's BACnet IP or Modbus TCP, or keep naming them. The fact that you can do that is fundamentally a huge step forward from what we're able to do on RS-45. So typically on RS-45, you can run one protocol at a low baud rate. So this, to me, is really important I think for obvious reasons. And because now we have the throughput, we have the ability to mix and match different protocols and get access to that data to across these, these different systems that are in buildings. So I saw a performance last week that for this whole concept, and I was quite impressed by what I saw because of what I just described in terms of the flexibility that it's going to afford us. And I also think that in parallel, in terms of the data problem that Kimon was driving at, the modeling of data from both the BIM side and the building side, in many respects, assumes you're going to use an IP type network or an Ethernet type network, right? Certainly will make it a lot easier, particularly when you go to the next level of trying to get it to the cloud or using AI to access the data. Trying to do that all over over some kind of 45 network becomes all that much harder. So I really, if this transition proves true, that more control systems start to become available running T1L, you solve distance problems, you solve integration problems, and it'd be much easier for developers to model their data in that kind of environment as opposed to modeling the data in a 485 environment. So that's what I'm seeing as a innovation, a fundamental innovation that transitions our industry. Because when I think back to, you know, where this whole industry began 40 years ago, it was 485. And then, you know, in the 90s, we started to introduce Ethernet along with ArcNet, and then ArcNet died and we went to Ethernet. But Ethernet has a fundamental distance limitation, involves a lot of routing and switching that in the building world can be problematic because their distances are much longer. And so if I can run on a twisted pair environment, twisted shielded pair, I can not only reuse existing wire, I can do it for lower cost, and yet I don't give up speed and I don't give up the ability to run multiple protocols, all of which I think is going to be very valuable to our industry.
The T1L is what you're most excited about, which
yes, exactly
makes sense. Jim, are you seeing that because you do a lot of work with BACnet and networks?
We've seen people looking at it. We haven't seen a few vendors have broad deployments. Everyone else is just talking about it right now. But I certainly see Steve's point and the value opportunity there. So it's good stuff. Don't see any reason why it shouldn't go broader. It just hasn't gone super broad yet.
It hasn't yet, but you know, it's like everything else, Jim. It's if we can build some momentum around it and get some use cases, I think it could adopt quite quickly.
Absolutely.
We're actually, there are some of the new lawn chip vendors are looking at lawn over T1P. Use
T1L.
T1L, I'm sorry, as a way to kind of utilize some of the newer technology, overcome some of the limitations of distance and so forth. So, and I'm in the same category, by the way. We've got, if I look at it from a vendor's perspective, how many of our vendors are talking about that technology? You know, we're starting to see more and more vendors doing stuff with it, which tells me that there is momentum behind this. It's starting to gain. As soon as there are products available, then comes design ins and so on and so forth. So I think it's starting to happen, actually.
Very interesting. We do need to move on. So Tracy, while you have the mic, do you want to talk about what innovation you're excited about?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, and you know what I've been kind of excited about, and just, you know, from my personal journey here and what we've been working on. You know, we've been moving our software to a new platform, and one of the things I've come to learn is when things are implemented correctly, especially in cloud kind of applications, cloud native kinds of stuff, and that data, like we've been talking about, is available no matter how you get it there, whether it's interoperable or open or proprietary or otherwise. Once that data is up there, it is getting increasingly easy to now connect that data to any number of AI models to do different kinds of things with that data, with that information, and so forth. So now when I used to, a year ago, and I talk about we're working with Keith, for instance, and applying AI to RTU optimization. I think a year from now, I'm going to be able to say, we've got this AI and this AI and this AI and this AI, all, utilizing the data that we're bringing in, doing different things to this. I hadn't thought about this as sort of a multi-pronged AI connectivity architecture until just the last month or so, when I was kind of exposed to some of this a little bit more directly. So what we'll be able to do once we get our data into the cloud is really kind of exciting for me from an innovation standpoint.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I know we've been talking a lot about that, but seeing this in practice, seeing it in reality, and how quickly and easily this will come about, I think is the innovation spark that I'm feeling there, to really start thinking about things differently, right? That's innovation lots of times, just looking at the same old problem, but thinking about it differently and solving it differently. I think that there is a whole new window that's going to open, or door that's going to open here pretty soon in our industry on some of this stuff.
Yeah, what innovation can happen if you can just make the simple assumption that you can get at all of the data that you need.
Right.
I think that's the point.
Yeah.
Cool.
Can I jump in now? Because I'd like to kind of build on that. The thing to me is innovation begets innovation. And so communication becomes a significant part of innovation. And just what's just happened on the screen here, the go round, and I'm using it for this, I'm using it for that. And then as soon as I see it, I'm going to use it for something completely different. So communication is cardinal. And I think that's our function as automated buildings, is to try and pull this together. And then secondly, the idea is to give the folks that know what they're talking about a voice, a direct voice, and let them publish in their own words. And I think we're trying to achieve that. But it's just trying to pull all these pieces together, make them visible. And another thing we often talk about is in our discussions, we get too far into the weeds. And we're talking at a level that only 6 people in the world understand what the hell you're talking about. So we need to, I think, create a map to the weeds, if that makes sense. And we actually, that graphic that you just came up with for C4SB is great. That looked to me like a map to the weeds and an example of that. So I think we should all kind of try to head in that direction. That's my humble opinion.
Yeah. That's why we're talking about it. So great. Good reminder, Ken. Thank you. So Jim, do you want to share your innovation?
Sure. I think that we've all been involved with innovation all of our careers. And if we look at DDC over the past 30 plus years, there have been a lot of innovations. But I'm more interested in looking at the idea of what are the boundaries that we should be looking at. So rather than innovating in our smaller little spaces, I'm interested in the silo to silo information. So to follow on what Tracy said and what Kimon said, I think there's a lot more value to be gleaned by going to much broader value propositions. And that's not just a question of the technology we innovate, but the customers, and basically being able to bridge the silos, the buying, the purchasing behavior of the customers to liberate that broader value. And I think that AI is going to give us an opportunity to hit reset on that, right? Because no matter what technology we develop, there's a question of how can we get people to adopt it and take it seriously. And with the disruption that AI is going to cause in the world, I think there's going to be another opportunity to be heard outside of the silos that we find ourselves selling into. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a different kind of innovation, but it's an innovation of thinking in a way.
That's right. It's an innovation in thinking and an innovation in convincing the customers to be more innovative in a broader sense. And you know, as business people, it's incumbent upon us to energize the imagination of those customers to see that value. And the organizational behavior of the curmudgeonly industries that we sell into heretofore have made that very difficult. Right?
I think the other thing that's happening there too is that we're touching so many other industries and they're all evolving extremely fast as well. And I think that's helping our innovation. We always struggled with innovation, but because we all have to use the communication industry and all these networks and clouds and stuff. In fact, so we now have to learn that. And as we learn it, we see what other companies and other folks are doing. And I think that, again, you know, innovation begets innovation. And I think that's really helping us grow as an industry.
We need to actually innovate to make it simpler to use these things. To your earlier point too, Ken, is that I've even described it sometimes like we have these open standards out there that are somewhat proprietary because only a few people know how to use it. So why are they good to use? So we have to think in terms of how do we innovate to let others from the outside that don't understand our silo be able to connect to it. And that's going to create the new opportunities that Jim talked about too, I think. The more that we can do that, where do they plug in and get the data that they need to support that particular use case that we never thought about, but they need access to that information to do it.
So I'd like to ask the question to the group is that how do our customers think they're going to innovate?
I was actually going to ask that question to Rick, so maybe.
Good. I'm sorry. I'll stop. Go ahead, Anton.
No, that was great. I should have just shut up.
Well, I think owners have been asking for a long time for innovations from this industry, and I just feel like we failed to deliver. So owners have been getting more and more articulate about what they want in terms of the ability to use data to make smarter decisions or to build better buildings or run better buildings or save energy. They're getting more and more articulate, and this whole thing called AI, whatever that is helping to bring attention to what they would like to be able to do across all parts of their business. You know, if you're a school, you're saying, how do I do school better? If I'm a hospital, how do I be a better hospital, deliver health better? And AI is helping with the ability to articulate or be able to identify the things that I can't do. So I think there'll be a very quick. Okay, so one of the things I'm excited about in terms of innovation is going to be the speed at which it happens. Because owners have been slow to ask for new innovations over the past, is it 40 years or 50 years we've been at this? I think it's 40. Thank God they've been slow because we are not real fast at delivering. But I think it's going to speed up dramatically because of the awareness of how digital transformation is affecting other parts of their world or other parts of their their existence, so their car, their house, their distribution, or their use of crypto or whatever. It's all their level of expectation of what is possible is just going through the roof. It's going really, really fast. And so our slowness, because of that's how it's been for 40 years, as it's been slow, I think is going to it's going to be shocking to see how crystal clear owners can be about what their new expectation is of the, the digitized world around them.
Which is our cue to move fast. But Ken, you were going to say something?
Well, yeah, just the thing I wanted to tie to that is, I'll call it mobile madness. Maybe that's not, again, not the right word, but I think you understand that mobile is just in everybody's pocket, and everybody is finding something they could do today that they couldn't do yesterday. And as soon as you use one of those programs that does that, it just sets your mind reeling as to all the things you could be doing. And that tied with 5G and now 6G is just going to radically change. And now we've got a common language, I think, is in the mobile transitions that are occurring. And they also fits very well our new workforce that's coming in. They don't know how to do anything on a laptop. Why would you use a laptop? What a clumsy device. So that whole movement to mobile, tied to faster networks, tied to having all of that stuff in the cloud, and everybody's doing it that way. So all we need to do is learn how everybody else is doing it that's successful. So I think, I don't know, just that mobile movement maybe is a good word for it. That the radical mobile movement is propelling us.
David, can I hand the mic over to you and talk about what you're excited about innovation-wise?
Yeah. So in Chicago right now, I've been working closely with developers, GCs, and specialty contractors. Don't call them subs, they're specialty contractors. And a lot of them are members of the Chicagoland Association of General Contractors, and AGC is a national organization. And in talking with developers and talking with the AGC group, a decade ago, there were over 60 cranes in the sky in Chicago. Now there are less than 6. The amount of construction that's happening, whether ground up construction or repurposing of existing buildings, has diminished greatly. Many private sector developers have stopped building multifamily in Chicago altogether. They are instead raising their rents. In real estate investment terms, they call it nicely rent growth. To someone coming out of college trying to live in Chicago, they call it blankety blank rent gouging. And we have a housing crisis. Now, rents are cheaper in Chicago than New York and San Francisco and other places relative to income, but still the amount of income is that's required to going to housing is going up. I'm saying all of this because I'm developing a project. I'm leading a project on the South Side, and we're still trying to build in the context of tariffs, supply chain issues, immigration labor making up 30% of construction labor at the least, and high interest rates and high return expectations from investors. So what is the data we need, and what is the process to still be able to build despite all of that headwind? And the thing that we're pursuing is using a quantity surveying cost management strategy, which is what's done in the UK and what's done in the Middle East and Ireland and other places around the world, where it's a bottom-up calculation of how many yards of concrete, how many pounds of rebar, how much aggregate, blah, blah, blah. What's your materials? What is your equipment? So forms and pumps for concrete. What's your blended labor rate rounded to the yards of concrete? and what's your overhead and what's your profit. And we're taking this approach, which is completely different than the way cost estimation is done in the US. And how are we doing this? We're leveraging the BIM model. We're taking the assemblies and identifying every assembly in the building and creating line items for both schedule and cost from every line item. So we're getting all the caissons, the columns, the slabs, the shear walls, etc. And then we can price those exactly. And what's crazy in the US, and I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but the cost estimator takes the 2D plans, gives them to the subs do their own quantity takeoffs and assume all the risk, when it's just ludicrous because you can get a much more accurate measurement from Revit. Why aren't we using Revit for this? And I don't want to lose everybody on this point, but if you start at the very beginning with your BIM model, identifying your assemblies and identifying your quantity takeoffs, as well as your room naming and space dimensions, this puts you on a trajectory for the type of asset management, because all of the data is collected from the very beginning and it's used in a very proactive way. And by grabbing that data out of the Revit model, as the steel tariff goes up or the aluminum tariff goes up, you can turn that knob up and down. If you just do general per square foot estimation, you have no granular control. And so we're attempting to do this. We'll see how it works. I'm happy to share how it works with everybody as we go along. But this is where using data from the model to de-risk it for everyone is all mutually advantageous, and it de-risks it for insurers and lenders, and insurers, lenders, and investors, so they may expect a lower interest rate or lower rate of return because we're de-risking the investment for them. So data, if it's used from the very inception of the project wisely, can provide value every step of the life cycle. And it leads perfectly into all the things we're talking about for operations.
So not only that BIM data, whatever is there, is not being used for operations, but it seems that it's not necessarily being used in some areas of constructions, which is, what the hell's the point?
It's insanely stupid. And I used to swear a lot on these calls. I'm trying to reform myself, but yeah, if we were at a bar, I'd be like, you can't believe all the but all of the truth I'm uncovering by taking a first principles data-driven approach as in the role as the master developer, it's just insane that this stuff isn't being used. And the last point I'll make, I could talk for hours about it now, but when you give the 2D drawings to a sub, they're like, when's it going to be built? 2027? Okay, they're going to guess on inflation. They're going to guess on labor increases. They're going to guess on all these things. Everybody pads everything. Then the GC pads their number on that. And then the construction cost estimator pads that, because they can't be wrong. It's always okay to be high, but it's never okay to be below. And so the cost estimating is nowhere near reality. And so what we're doing is we're asking for pricing today so we can hold all the contingency in one place.
Very smart. But David, what it does, it sounds like it kind of basically requires that BIM be part of the design and design process for proposal generation, for quotations, right?
100%. You're exactly correct, Steve.
Yeah, and so having done that, then there's no argument whether you need BIM or whether BIM's a good idea. It's being utilized in order just to get the proposals, to get quotes from the suppliers. Now,
exactly,
it exists. and now transitioning it to the operational side is just a matter of people getting used to it.
Absolutely. And as an example, you know, the most expensive thing in a building is the structure. And we're going to have a ridiculously accurate number for the concrete structure before we even get into SD design phase. And the second most expensive thing is the building enclosure. This is the hand motion to indicate building enclosure, by the way. And that's the most, no, now that's the roof and the foundation.
Oh, right.
Rick. This is the building enclosure. But the enclosure is the second most expensive thing. So we'll know the gross square footage because we simply wrapped the structure model. And then the third most expensive thing are the kitchens, and the fourth are the bathrooms for multifamily and hotel, which is what we're building. And we're going to do a Revit model, a very detailed Revit model of those, and then just multiply the quantities out. But then we can go up to Kohler, Wisconsin with our project and say, we want you to lock in manufacturing so we know this stuff is going to be available when we build 2 months later. And we lock in the supply chain. We could get a little bit better pricing too, but we're de-risking it for everybody. And so much of the time wasted on site is actually waiting for materials delivery and things like that, where the supply chain got screwed up. So we're trying to look at supply chain during design as well.
All right, that's fantastic, David. You sort of indicated that to me, and I'm glad that you've shared it with the group today. It's great. And we've run out of the clock. We're actually way past, so we need to wrap. So thank you,
Sorry
everyone.
about that.
Thanks, Kimon, for joining us, and we'll be back next week, hopefully with the other two new members, Glenn and Doug. But until then, hope everybody have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye all.
See y'all.
Bye.